Hey, deserving listeners, it's time to continue our journey with Darcy. I am a couples therapist, and I'm going to react to this TV show. We're going to follow Darcy's story and see if anything useful comes out of my face.
I just want you to know how I feel. I'd like to know how you feel too.
But if you're coming here to break up, then you could just do it over the phone.
Exactly. I'd like to come and spend some time with someone I share a romantic notion with.
A notion.
I want to see where the land lies.
I don't have a good feeling about meeting him, especially how he's been behaving.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of writing on the wall that he's coming to break up with you. So it makes sense that you would not have a good feeling about it. The issue here is that we've seen Darcy throughout the show have evidence. I, of course, can't diagnose her. I can't assess her. I would only be able to assess her if she were to come to my office, and I would be able to ask her questions and get her perspective. But at least what the producers are showing us, there's, in the little bits and pieces, there is evidence that she has a complex around abandonment and not feeling good enough. And the way that she defends herself from that, which is very painful to imagine that you're always going to be abandoned or you're not good enough for anyone to stick around, that you would have defense mechanisms to get you through the day, just to help you survive in the world. And one of the defense mechanisms is to go into denial or idealization or distractions. Or another thing that I haven't talked about yet with her is that, and maybe a lot of people have already thought about this, and it just took me a while to occur to me, is that for Darcy, there's a possibility that early in her life, she had some self-esteem and some worth based on how she looks. Total speculation to this date on the show. To my knowledge, we haven't really heard anything about her childhood. I wish they would talk about that, honestly, because it would help to understand her and make her a more full character. But total speculation. She grew up in a family with abandonment, with chaos, and maybe even experienced some abuse. Hard to know, but at least some notion of people not being attuned to her in the way that she deserved, and also people not being there for her in a way that she deserved. And as a child, 0 to 10, maybe she just felt worthless. Her older sister seems like she might have developed or not her older sister, but her twin sister developed kind of a top-down, I'm superior dynamic, and Darcy developed a dynamic of feeling worthless and being the scapegoat in the family. There's some evidence of that. Hard to know. But maybe at the age of 13, 14, when boys start paying attention to her, they started really paying attention to her beauty. And maybe even adults or friends started really going, wow, you're really beautiful. Can I hang out with you? Wow, you're really beautiful. Everything you say is interesting to me. And in those moments, it might have been the first time in her life when she actually had some worth, some notion that, wait, so if I'm beautiful, people come to me. I don't have to chase them. They listen to me. They stick around longer than they would otherwise. Well, how about I really always make sure that I'm good looking, that I'm appealing sexually or otherwise, so that people will pay attention to me. It would stand to reason that would attract you to a life of fashion. It's possible Stacy also had this complex. She grew up in the same family, and they would both be attracted to making sure they're always looking just right, making sure that they always have the right clothes on. There's nothing wrong with fashion. There's nothing wrong with trying to look good. There is something self-destructive about using that as your only way of gaining any kind of attachment security and self-worth. Usually people don't receive that kind of attention in a deep way. It's conditional. It's like, well, sure, people are paying attention to me, but that's only because they want to have sex with me, or that's only because I wear the right clothes. They don't really love me for who I am. So there seems to be some evidence of that in Darcy. Now, society might watch Darcy on the TV and say, oh, she's so materialistic. She's so into plastic surgery, or whatever we want to call it. She's so into her hair and that kind of thing. Whereas when I look at it clinically, I would have an hypothesis about someone who seemingly doesn't have any self-esteem in any other arena. And that points to a history where for the very first time in her life, she was given some esteem, where she builds some self-esteem like, well, this is my place in the world. I can be an attractive, good-looking person. And that's what would, cause someone to continue to go down that road and neglect other areas of their lives. I'll say for myself, I did not gain self-esteem from that, from being attractive. What I did gain self-esteem in my teenage years was being smart and talking about things. I would talk with my friends and they would say like, well, that's an interesting thing that you just said. And I would say, it was? And I'd be 16 thinking, I have interesting things to say? Well, I didn't think about that earlier. And that planted the seed for me becoming a therapist and also becoming an educator. And so one could say that I pour a lot of effort into that. So we all do this, but if it's rigid and we don't also, so if I felt like my only worth was my ability to say things that were of use to other people, there's a pretty good possibility that I wouldn't really get my needs met deep down. That a more fundamental need being met is, am I lovable in my personal life? Does my wife really know me and love me? That's, to me, a more fundamental esteem or worth that most people are looking for. Do the people close to me want to be with me? Do they like me? Do they like me so much that they want to always be with me and never be with anyone else? So I'm rambling, but so that's a speculation about her. Again, I can't know. And as I always say, I can't diagnose from afar. I would have to actually get to know these people in my office. And if I did, I couldn't talk about it on the internet. While I'm on this subject, subscribe, hit the bell below if you haven't already.
And then something happened. This morning, I got a text from Stacy with some pictures. And the pictures were of Tom and another woman.
From what I understand, what happened last season in season 3, Tom sort of broke up with Darcy, saying he wanted to be friends and he wanted to be single. And he said something along the lines of, if you meet anyone, Darcy, that is better than me or that sparks your interest, I encourage you to date them. That is a very passive way of breaking up with someone. It makes sense as to why people do that. In my book, usually it's because people are engaging in a defense of, if you've ever broken up with someone and you're Tom and you're like, oh crap, I have to break up with someone. If you've ever been in those shoes, you know how this feels. It's mortifying. You're like, I am going to disappoint this person. This person is going to be very sad and I'm going to be the cause of it. It's going to be all my fault that person is going to be in pain. And I love that person or I like that person and I don't want them to be in pain. I know how it feels to be in pain. I don't want to be the cause of that. And so that messes with people's decision making, and then they will either not break up, even though they have in their heads, or when they do break up, they will do it in such a passive way that because they're trying to sugarcoat it. They're trying to go easy on the person. They're trying to say things like, well, maybe things will work out, even though they know it won't. Or, well, let's just take a break and let's see what happens. For people like Darcy, who, because, again, speculation, they have complexes around abandonment and worthlessness, and that create defense mechanisms that kick in to defend themselves against that. When they're being broken up with, or there's a lot of messages of rejection, they will use a defense mechanism to protect themselves from that notion by saying, well, he'll come around, or he didn't really break up with me. He just sort of said he wanted a break, so surely we're still together. And then you engage in fantasy to protect yourself from the reality that yet again you're being abandoned and made to feel like you're worthless. So that dynamic seemed to have been happening. Then in the tell-all episode of season 3, they were back together again, but it seemed like it was pretty casual, like they were dating, and it wasn't like they were on the road of getting married or anything. So in the intervening months, in the months between the tell-all of season 3 and season 4, there wasn't a lot of contact between Tom and Darcy. It's unclear about what Tom told Darcy. I would suspect that Tom gave the message to Darcy that they weren't exclusive, or at least didn't give the message that they were exclusive. And so Tom has been walking around thinking, well, sure, I'm dating Darcy, but, I'm dating other people. But either Tom wasn't forthcoming about that, or he hinted at it because of his passive ways, and Darcy went into a defense around it, believing that they were still basically together. So now Tom is wanting to come out to New York, I'm guessing, to break up with her. And in her mind, she feels like he's dumping her, when in reality, he might be thinking, I'm just informing her that our dating non-exclusive relationship is over, which shouldn't hurt her that much or something. Then Stacy, Darcy's twin sister, finds this picture on the internet of Tom with this other woman. And that doesn't look like his sister. We actually know what his sister looks like. That's not his sister. And he looks like it's a romantic situation. Now, maybe that's an old picture, maybe it's a new picture, but I'm guessing to Tom's perspective, he has passively told Darcy that they're not exclusive and that it's okay to be dating other people. And I'm guessing that Darcy didn't really hear that because it was either too passive, or her defense mechanisms kicked in. So on one hand, if we were allowed to talk to Tom and ask him, he might say, look, I didn't break any rules. I told Darcy, blah, blah, blah. Or another scenario we could, if we talked to Darcy and Tom, or we were a little fly on the wall listening to all their conversations, Tom is basically being a dick because he gave the impression that they were exclusive, that Tom wouldn't be dating anyone else, and that this picture is completely immoral and unethical. We don't know. Or I don't know. Maybe you know. But anyway, let's continue.
Stacy got these pictures from her fiance, Florian, who's still friends with Tom. I didn't see these photos on social media because Tom and I blocked each other a few weeks ago after a fight. One of these pictures is Tom with this woman.
Okay, so another data point that we just heard, they blocked each other after a fight. So do you block people that you're dating or you're exclusive with and you haven't talked to someone in a few weeks? It just points to this possibility that Tom has a lot of reasons to believe that it's okay for him to be dating. But it's also possible that Tom did not, because of his defenses about guilt and shame, wasn't very forthcoming about breaking up officially. That Darcy does have some reason, but I don't know. This kind of looks like, although it would be hurtful for anyone, I mean, even if Darcy did consider themselves broken up, and then she gets this picture of seeing someone that she's still grieving about the loss of seeing him with another woman, that's going to hurt. That's going to sting. That's going to make you feel bad. Not all the time, but it often does. So I'm not going to take that away from Darcy. That's a normal human feeling. But the indignation and the accusation that Tom has done something wrong, I don't know if we know enough data to be able to say that Tom did do something wrong. Let's see what happens.
I mean, she's like right in his crotch. Like he's got his hands all over her, on her leg. It's shocking to see. I don't know who this woman is, but I will not let any man play with my heart. So I need to find out what's going on.
Now, in no way am I accusing Darcy of something that she did something wrong. Whenever people do things that might seem a little strange or might not be something you would do, it's often because of these defense mechanisms that were very necessary for emotional survival, maybe even physical survival when they were children. So it's very possible that, for example, total speculation, if, for example, Darcy and Stacy had a father that abandoned them, well, you're at a dilemma. You have a Sophie's choice in those moments. You can just acknowledge like, well, I guess he didn't love us. Or you can go into a defense of idealization or denial of like, well, he still loves us, but the only reason why he's not contacting us or showing up at our birthday parties is because he's really busy, or just something along those lines. So neither option is helpful or good, right? Like acknowledging the reality and accepting, wow, I guess my dad doesn't love me. That's a huge bummer. The defense of like, well, he's only abandoning us because he's really busy. He really does love us deep down. Well, that's not a happy thing, because you have to uphold all this thing. And there's a notion there of, well, maybe that's not true. So when we do these things to kids, they have to choose between the lesser of two evils often. And so there could be a pattern for Darcy where it's a very common defense. It's just like, oh, well, I know I'm being abandoned, but I'm sure that they do love me, and I'm sure that this is going to work out, because the alternative is to accept that someone has abandoned you, and then that's like kicks in like, I'm not good enough, I'm worthless. And so there's a lot of reasons why someone would do that. Again, I don't know if I know enough detail about the interactions between Tom and Darcy, so I'm reading into a lot of this. I'd want to know like what happened. What did Tom say? Was there an official breakup here? What happened when they had a fight and then they blocked each other on social media? Like, what was exactly said in those moments? That would really help, but maybe we'll find out. Let's see.
My gut was saying something was not right. Not cool. Unbelievable.
Wow.
That's right.
String me along? You say you love me? Wow. That's not love.
You went all the way to London for this?
Yeah, on my dime. Wow.
So then another defense that can kick in that might have been developed when these twins were little, again, I have no idea, is the defense against once the dam breaks and it's like you can't defend and idealize anymore, and you just have to admit, wow, that person really does not care about my feelings. Another defense can kick in, which is anger and a sort of crusade, if you will, against the person, of just like, I'm going to get back at the person. I hate that person, that kind of thing, which is kind of a normal part of grief. It can be a very healthy thing to go through those kinds of feelings. But if you stay in that space, then it defends you against the realization, when you're not angry and you're not in denial, that sometimes people just leave you. Sometimes people don't like you enough, or they want to do other things. And that is a really difficult thing to accept for all of us. But for those of us who have been given enough love and enough attunement and enough attachment security, it's easier for us to accept that, because we know, well, sure, that person rejected us, but there's other people who have always loved me and always will. For me, my parents have always loved me and I know that 100%, and I did know that growing up. Just a side note on that, I remember in the 70s and 80s, that was when divorce rates started to rise to the level that they are at now. I don't know the exact statistics, but it was becoming a thing, and a lot of kids were talking about it. I remember a lot. My parents are still married. They've been married for 56 years. And so a lot of us kids were talking like, well, if our parents get divorced, who would we go with? That was a talk amongst me and my friends. And it's like, would you go with your mom? Would you go with your dad? And I remember being asked the question, and I really thought about it. I was probably like 10 or something. And I thought, well, I don't think I can choose, because I love them equally and I like both of them as parents. So that tells you something about the quality of the parenting I received. And so when I've been rejected, it hurts, it's awful, it sucks, it is the worst. And I have the security that I can bank on and say like, well, that's the anomaly. Usually people stick around. But for Darcy and Stacey, possible speculation, who knows, hypothesis, maybe the default was abandonment and lack of attunement, lack of attention, lack of security. And so when you get abandoned, it throws everything off and you have nothing to grab onto. You have no other thing to be like, well, at least I have that person. That even the two of them seem to not really have a secure attachment, because when push comes to shove between the two of them, they seem to have a lot of contempt and resentment towards each other. And they're not very supportive of each other, at least the behavior we've seen on the show. So even the twins don't seem to be very securely attached. And so it's possible that for Darcy, there's just nothing to grab onto. And so a defense against that is just to be angry and to get bitter and just be like, I hate people. I hate him. Everyone sucks. Men suck. That's another thing. You'll see people will genderize this. Heterosexual men will say all women these days, it's all about feminism and it's ruining, they have all the control, the incel people. We see that. It comes from hurt and lack of attachment security. And for women, heterosexual women, they will say, oh, men today, it's all about the hookup culture, or, it's all about young, beautiful women that they can, show off on Instagram or whatever they say. You'll hear these things. For gay men, you'll hear other kinds of things. For gay women, you'll hear other kinds of things as well. And it's normal to have that to be part of the loss process. I would be worried if someone didn't go through anger when they were getting broken up with, but to stay there and not to advance to another level of like, well, that sucked and that hurt, but I'm still a good person and I still have worth. And, all these other people still love me. So, but for Darcy, we've seen time and time again, even on little incidents, she will plummet into worthlessness of just like, once again, it's all my fault. So that's what I'm observing the patterns we've seen in Darcy is that anger defense.
Just hurts. Feel deceived and disrespected.
That's a good, human, healthy place to be at. It hurts. I feel disrespected. It hurts. Now, what I'm worried about her right now is that she's going to a place of worthlessness because she has nothing else to grab onto to say, well, at least I can know that I'm worthwhile because these other people have made me feel worthwhile. I'm worried that she's plummeting into worthlessness.
Maybe I should go to New York just to kind of confront him, like,
It can
let him
always
see
be his way or the highway. I know my sister and deserves better. I mean, I think he's already proved that he's not in love with her. She should just walk away and just be done.
All right, well, that does it for that installment of Psychology in Seattle, in which I react to the Darcy story, 90 Day Fiancé Before the 90 Days. I'm worried about Darcy, so let's see what happens in future episodes.